What is up, folks? This is Addy Ads, and it's the 1st of March. This is Public Intelligence. We got a great return guest, which we haven't spoken to in a while, Brad Johnson, former CIA chief of station. And his expertise really is foreign affairs, and with everything that's going on in Ukraine and Eastern Europe with regards to the Russian Ukrainian conflict. We're going to get his take on that. And if we have time left over, we're going to cover maybe Canada, Trudeau, and some of the trucker stuff and anything else that we find relevant. But I want to thank you for coming on the show again, Brad. And if you could just give a brief introduction in case we have some first-time viewers, which I expect we might. Obviously, you used to work for the CIA as a chief of station, but anything else you want to add to your intro? And thanks for coming on the show again, sir.
No, it's my pleasure, Addy. It's been too long. I always enjoy our conversations here, so feel free. We can get together anytime. Yes, I was in the CIA 25 years, and I was a chief of station multiple times in the agency. I was in what was at the time called the operations division, which those are the guys that are overseas doing espionage. So that was essentially my background. Everything that had anything to do with the espionage, I've done, the covert action and everything involved with that. I have been involved with at different times in my career. So now what I've done after getting out of the agency is I founded a nonprofit that's called Americans for Intelligence Reform, which I'll throw in my shameless plug here, which is the website is intelreform.org. That's Americans for Intelligence Reform, intelreform.org. And so kind of now my passion, what I do is I've taken a look at what's happened in the intelligence agencies and the CIA specifically, of course, but our capabilities are so greatly diminished, and a lot of the things that the levels of training and things that I had and the experience I had running operations, espionage cases, just no longer exists. I mean, nobody has that level of capability or operations within U.S. intelligence, and that's something that's extremely dangerous. So I'm really dedicated to building back up the intelligence agencies to a level where they don't have so much overlap, they operate more efficiently, and they operate at higher levels. And by degrading those capabilities, we increase the threat to the United States. So that's what I want to see reversed. And, it wasn't that many years ago that the CIA was able to go toe-to-toe on intelligence issues, the CIA by itself, go toe-to-toe with the rest of the world combined. It wasn't that long ago. And now we're second rate, maybe third rate. And that has to be reversed. So that's what we're after. So that's my background, and that's what I'm up to now. And well, we can move on to Ukraine whenever you like.
Yeah, that was a great introduction there, Brad. And yeah, what's your take, sir? Is this surprising to you? What has happened? Why do you think Putin is doing this? Has he been pushed too far, or is it something that he's been planning for a while? Yeah, what do you think? And I don't know what your intelligence sources are like on the ground or anything like that, but as far as the combat, if that's still ongoing, yeah, anything you can help us out with, Brad?
Sure, happy to. None of this is a surprise. This is all stuff that really anybody paying much attention has seen coming for a long time. Putin has been remarkably straightforward and steadfast in his opinions and his positions and what he's after and what he's doing. There's very little variance in his message, which one thing that comes up now all the time, everybody, even today on mainstream media and Fox News, even Fox Business, one of the things everybody's questioning is Putin's sanity, which that's kind of crazy just by itself. There's no reason whatsoever. There's nothing solid that you would point to anywhere that would indicate that Putin's crazy, or none of his behavior is inconsistent or out of character. It's all very, very straightforward. What there is a difference of opinion, and it's the left's sort of always fallback position that when you disagree with somebody, that person you disagree with must be crazy. That's sort of what they always do. So that's what we see coming out of the mainstream media. It's pure BS, pure hype. There's just nothing to it. I mean, if anyone involved in this situation is mentally deficient, it's Joe Biden, who's almost certainly suffering from vascular dementia. So, I mean, therein you have some mental issues that are very real and demonstrable. You can look back at Joe Biden talking 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, and you see a decline in this man. So, I mean, it's, there's something that I think is pretty clear. But Putin he's grown up. Russia looks at Ukraine as part of Russia, particularly the Crimea and Donbass and those regions that are mostly Russians living there. So from his perspective, I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong. What I'm saying is this is his perspective and his view of it. All of those parts of the world of Ukraine are his. They're part of Russia. That's how he views it. And there is historical precedent for it. There's some very solid reasons why he would believe that to be the case. So from his perspective, he's the good guy because he's trying to preserve Mother Russia, where you've got these Ukraine upstarts who are terrorists trying to attack what's part of Russia. So that's his view of this whole thing. And as I said, you can go back 10 and 15 years and it's just very consistent. When he annexed all this stuff in 2014 and the lead up to all of that, his annexation of Crimea, now all of this stuff was being said. And you don't see the Russian population, jumping up and down going, oh my God, this is crazy, because they all view it that way. That is their perspective. Now, again, we don't necessarily see it that way. We tend to disagree, but that doesn't make Putin crazy. And yet that's what the press is trying to portray out of all of this stuff. And Russia needs Crimea. And this is something I've been saying for a very long time, years as we discuss this. The only way you're ever going to get Crimea out of Putin's hands is to pry it from his cold, dead fingers. It's just, there is no other way. He views it as theirs, and the economic impact of having Crimea under Russian control cannot be underestimated. It is worth billions of dollars to Russia. It is a huge economic commercial port there, and it is a year-round warm water port, which Russia does not have. All their northern ports are closed during the winter. And so that port is something that from the Black Sea through the Bosphorus out into the Mediterranean and then on to the Atlantic and the rest of the world's oceans, that gives him commercial access to everybody. The same goes for the Russian Navy. They cannot be a world power if their Navy is shut down 6 months out of the year for winter. So it's necessary to him in every way. And as I said, there's a hundreds of year pattern of worry on the part of Russia about not having warm water ports, and this was the solution Russia has had available to them for a very, very long time. And we're talking hundreds of years back. So this is just their view on all of this. And as I said, that doesn't constitute insanity to have a perspective for which you have many reasons to conclude that's the right perspective. That doesn't make anybody crazy. And his behavior is consistent, far more consistent than Biden's. Just look at Biden's response to all of this as this was building up in this latest go around in Ukraine, because this has been going on for, as I said, for a very long time, for the last 2 decades after the breakup of the Soviet Union. Well, more like 4 decades now, but this has all been slowly building through this period of decades. And just look at what Biden's behavior has been over the last year. And he was threatening, like the massive retaliation through sanctions. The vice president of the United States came out and said the same thing. Oh, we're going to have massive, reaction with sanctions against Russia if you, lift a finger and all of this. Well, what happens? So basically a week ago, Russia essentially, they don't invade, but what they do is they do a preemptive strike all the way around Ukraine. And they're using aircraft and artillery and things like that to destroy essentially equipment. They're destroying the Ukraine aircraft. They're destroying their tanks and trucks and all that sort of stuff. But if you look back, those first 2 days, there were only like 30 people killed. So they were strictly going after the munitions and equipment necessary for Ukraine to fight against Russia. So it was a preemptive strike. And those first 2 days, that's all it was. And almost, in the scheme of things, 30 people killed is almost nothing. So what does Biden do? And this is stuff that basically Putin has been telegraphing all along he was going to do this stuff. And so what is Biden's reaction? Where are all these massive, counter strikes through sanctions and all this stuff that Biden had been constantly hammering, saying he was going to do, and in his, Jen Psaki and his pressers was saying the same stuff. Oh, we're in massive sanctions. And where is it? What did he do? What he did was 2 sanctions against 2 Russian banks. Now, in the scheme of things, that's nothing. That's less than nothing, because it shows you're not doing anything if that's what you do. And Putin's, I guarantee you, my reaction as a professional intelligence officer, as is Putin, former KGB, was to laugh, because this is less than nothing, as I said, because it shows that they're not going to do anything serious. So you're free to go to the next stage, and that's precisely what Putin did. He did his preemptive strike. He did everything that he wanted to do. He took out most of the equipment, the war-fighting equipment that Ukraine had, so that Ukraine couldn't continue the fight against him, because he wants the regions that he already owns. He just wanted to be left alone with what he has. So he took it to the next level. And the next level was he started doing more incursions, and he sent in some Chechen troops that are kind of a special operations troops that he has. And keep in mind, these are the scum of the earth troops that he sent in that are highly trained and highly motivated. They're Muslim. They're very happy to come in and kill these it's Orthodox Christian country in Ukraine. And they're very happy to kill these guys. They see it as like a moral high ground to do these sorts of things. And so he sends these guys in to start chasing down Ukrainian leadership. Why? Because he's moving it to the next level. What is the next level? You destroy their ability to fight back against you, and then you go after leadership, because he wants to wipe out Ukrainian leadership, discredit them completely, or kill them, or maybe even take them prisoner, who knows. And he wants to install essentially a puppet government, a new government at the very least that's pro-Russia. And so, he's just taking it to the next stage. Every time the West, who's in complete shambles because we have no leadership, every time that's complete shambles, that nobody responds in any way, Putin knows he's free to move to the next stage. And if you look all through history, look at what Hitler did in the early stages of World War II. He just did whatever he wanted. Nobody challenged him. Nobody stopped him. We had Neville Chamberlain out there waving around the peace treaty, peace in our time. I solved the world's problems, just as World War II kicks off. And, this is, you got to stop these guys. There's things that could be done without starting a war that would actually probably stop Putin. And once that's done, then, we go to the peace treaty, which, by the way, I'll have to say, I think what's been going on behind the scenes. Now, keep in mind, Biden, as I said, he's mentally got issues. He's got this vascular dementia that's caused by a series of mini strokes that causes some of the blood vessels to fail in the brain, and parts of the brain are damaged. And so you've got that guy in charge, a close group of people that have been with him since he was a senator around him, and he's got this little closed group. You notice everybody has been fleeing, working for the vice president, and nobody has changed around the president. It's this same group of people since the beginning. But everything he touches turns to manure. And I think that's what we've seen happen here. I think Biden went into this thinking that what he was going to do was essentially be able to come to some sort of agreement with Biden. Putin. Putin's going to go in, do what he wants to do. They'll arrive at some sort of meeting in the middle to come to some sort of agreement, and then Biden will take his victory lap and claim that he, much like Neville Chamberlain we mentioned earlier, has brought peace in our time, and he's the greatest hero in the universe because he just saved us from World War III. I think that's still Biden's plan, and I think one of the reasons that the press is just in this bizarre feeding frenzy of BS is because they want to feed the fears of people for 2 reasons. One, to help Biden so that when it comes time for Biden to say, oh, I saved the world, peace in our time, it makes sense to people because they've had all this hype over the previous month or 2. I think the second reason is how do these guys make money? And they make money. It's always follow the money. How do they make money? And it's by bringing up their readership, bringing up their viewership or whatever, television, news, newspapers, whatever, radio. And they bring those numbers up, and that means they can charge more to advertisers. So these things are perfectly suited for mainstream media because the hype brings their ratings up, therefore they make more money. It also supports Biden, who's going to pull this magic rabbit out of the hat at some point. Now, Biden, because he failed to create those sanctions or to impose those sanctions that he said he was going to do, and he was unable to come to any sort of agreement with Europe to do something, he has failed over and over and over to get this under control. And so Russia keeps stepping up. And that's where we find ourselves today. But make no mistake, if Russia had wanted to completely overrun Ukraine, they could have done it in the first 24 hours. I mean, in some places from Belarus to Kiev and stuff, we're talking like 30 or 40 miles. You know, a tank can do that easily, you know, in a day. I mean, in a few hours, they could have been all over the country. They could have had a couple 100,000 troops and thousands of tanks and trucks and soldiers and everything in all of Ukraine in the first 24 hours. And the fighting would have been over within 48 hours, but they didn't do it. Why? They didn't want to. They did what they wanted to do, which was a preemptive strike, because they wanted to stop Ukraine fighting against them. They don't want the rest of Ukraine. They want what they have. They want the status quo maintained. Then when nothing happened, again, you know, we encouraged them to take the next step, which is destroy leadership. Why? Why would you remove leadership? Because you want them gone so you can put in a pro-Russia puppet government. That doesn't mean you're invading the country to conquer it. It means you're setting up a government so you can pull back to your lines and not have them be screwing with you. So, I mean, it's very, very clear what Russia's up to. But, you know, like I said, the feeding frenzy in the press and the dissimulation and all of the hype and all of this is for these other reasons. So we've all known that there's been discussions going on in the background. Biden has readily admitted that there's still negotiations going on with Russia, and there's been negotiations going on all the time. So my personal opinion is that the real issue behind the scenes in these secret negotiations, the real issue is that Putin is demanding that the West, that Ukraine not be part of NATO, and that the West recognize these breakaway areas, Donbass and all, as newly minted independent nations. And I think he's demanding that we recognize those as independent nations, therefore not part of Ukraine, therefore under his control, and he will man the borders with Russian troops of these newly minted countries, and that is de facto annexation, essentially, of those areas for Putin, and it's recognized then by the West. So he's then tied in, has the puppet government in Ukraine, his problems are over. And I'll point out a couple of things that support my contention on this. I think that's where the argument lies. That's where the disagreement is with Biden and Putin. And, you know, now, why would Ukraine ever accept such a thing? Well, they would not under any circumstances, except what has the Biden administration done? They've gone to Congress and said, Congress, we need, I believe it was $6 billion. There's been different figures kicked around, but the latest I saw was, I believe, $6 billion. $6 billion that we're going to give to Ukraine. So, okay, Ukraine, here's your $6 billion. You're now all rich. Shut up and go home. It's over. And that's the payoff to get Ukraine to shut up. And so everything fits, you know, it's a nice, neat package of what's going on. And as I said, it fits beautifully with what Putin is doing. But Putin keeps upping the ante because nobody stops him. What Biden is trying to do is negotiate this peace treaty. But Putin in the background is going, okay, no NATO, which Biden doesn't want to do, and recognize these new countries, which Biden doesn't want to do. But as it gets worse and worse and worse, and as Putin keeps upping the ante, Biden is eventually going to have to agree. So I think that's the likely outcome right now. Things could evolve and change, but right now, I would say that Putin is going to win. Biden is going to lose. He's eventually going to have to give up on all of this, pay off Ukraine, what's left of Ukraine, admit that, you know, give Russians de facto control of those areas and recognize it as legal in some way. And I think what they'll ultimately do and say, well, it's a 10-year peace treaty that we defer, you know, recognizing it, but we allow that Russia has control of those borders for the next 10-year period while we discuss what gets done, you know, because they love kicking the can down the road. I'm figuring it's going to be something like that, which means, you know, Putin's got 10 years to dig in and take full control. that'll give him plenty of time to do what he needs. And Biden saves just that little tiny bit of face so that he can say, well, we didn't give in. And then Biden takes his victory lap and does the Neville Chamberlain wave the paper peace in our time? Gee, aren't I a great president? Because what is he's faced with a terrible problem. He's upside down in every poll, and he's under 40%. He's in the 30% favorable ratings on almost every poll. And we've got off-year elections coming up here in November. Not to mention, a lot of the primaries are starting over the summer period. There's a lot of primaries. So he's got real problems. If it goes forward this way, the Democrats are going to get slaughtered. And I mean slaughtered. So he's got to do something. He's desperate. And I think this is one of his grand plans. He just tried to knock all of this off the news cycle by nominating a black female to the Supreme Court. And what did that get him? Nada, absolutely nothing. In one day of reporting in the news cycle, and that was it. It was over. So he's still now desperately doubling down on this. I think there's no question that Secretary of State Blinken and the head of the CIA or whoever he can get to go beg the Russians to make a deal are out there begging to make a deal with the Russians. And the Russians, just like I said, they keep upping the ante because they know they'll get more in the deal. This is negotiations. And Biden has to have a deal. Putin doesn't. So that's why I say this is unfolding this way. I think the fix is essentially all in, and it's unfortunate that a lot of the Ukrainian people are getting trounced on and killed in one way or another. Yeah. But this is how the world works. This is how these things operate. So I think this is going to unfold just about this way. And I would, if I were going to predict, I think Biden stretching it out views that as a mixed blessing because the closer to elections, probably better for him. But I think this is his one grand claim to fame in his own kind of addled mind. And I think this group of advisors around him, are all agreeing, doing the bobblehead thing like this, go, oh, yeah, this is going to work. And we will claim victory and save the world from World War III and peace in our time. And everybody vote for us in November. I think that's their whole shtick. That's what they're hoping for, which if that works, I will be absolutely stunned. That's one of the most stupid plans I can imagine, but that's typical of Biden. So it's within character for him. I think it's going to fail big. I think it's all going to be a mess. I don't think it's going to spin out of control. I don't think that Putin is going to suddenly say, well, I'm going to go on and invade Poland and conquer Poland, because it's inconsistent with his behavior. Like I said, if he wanted to take over and control and conquer Ukraine, he would have done it in the first 24 hours. And he hasn't. It's been very stage by stage by stage. And in 24 hours, he could have come in and just killed all the army, and he did not. 30 killed in the first 48 hours. That just makes no sense to conclude his goal is just to wipe out and conquer Ukraine, because he could have so easily done that and did not. So why would he then go on and suddenly now magically, well, I'm going to kind of skip over Ukraine, but I am going to go conquer Poland. It's just weirdness. They're creating all this stuff about nuclear threat and all of this, but there's nothing in this that shows that Putin himself is looking at any of that stuff. He's doing exactly what he wants to do because nobody's stopping him. So that's how you know it's what he wants to do, because he's free to do whatever he wants. So he's doing it. And this is what we've seen unfold.
What do you think is going to be Zelensky's fate? And then why do you think Putin did not do something like this while Trump was in office?
Well, I think the answer to that's clear. Trump is somebody that they fear and or respected. I don't know, it doesn't matter which of those things is correct, whether he was feared or respected. But some combination is probably true. They knew that Trump would have reacted and actually done something. So it just wouldn't happen. I'll tell you a little story from years ago, but I was this is something that nobody remembers anymore. I was actually talking to a defector from Cuba. Fidel Castro was still alive in those days and still in control. And I was chatting with this defector, and at the time, this was Clinton era when Clinton was president, and he was trying to make peace with Cuba. And Cuba didn't want to change its status because there was a blockade against Cuba, an economic blockade, which because of that economic blockade, they were getting massive amounts of money from Russia and all of these other countries, the communist bloc, and they were made famous on the world stage. Fidel Castro was famous because of this blockade against him by the United States. If a peace treaty had been settled between the United States and Cuba, and then Cuba was sort of free to just be a normal country, he would have lost all of that aid, and he would have lost his important position on the world stage. So the last thing that Fidel Castro wanted was that. So what did he do? In these waters between the southern part of Florida and Cuba, which is a very narrow area, a lot of Cubans try to escape on little homemade rafts and stuff. So it's very dangerous. A lot of them get killed. So there was a group called Brothers to the Rescue that still exists, and they fly little Cessnas out over this ocean looking for people on rafts who are stranded. And then they call the Coast Guard, and under the laws, the Coast Guard would go get them and they'd bring them back to the United States. That's how the laws were set up, only for Cubans, but that was the way it worked. So what did Fidel Castro do? He sent out a couple of MiGs, and those MiGs shot down these little single-engine, two-passenger, two-person Cessnas, that fly at 60 or 70 miles an hour. And so they shot those down and killed the two people in both of those aircraft. Those are, like I said, little Cessna, unarmed, single-engine, clearly civilian aircraft. So he shoots them down with a MiG. Why? Because he wanted to stop this peace treaty with Clinton, because Clinton was bound and determined to get rid of all the sanctions and blockade against Cuba. So that was how Fidel Castro stopped it. So I was commenting to this defector. I said, if I were president for a day and Fidel Castro shot down two of my civilian aircraft, meaning I'm president of the United States, so they're mine, and he shoots those two civilian aircraft down and kills those poor four people, the two in each aircraft, I would have gone to the U.S. military and I said, U.S. military, you've got 48 hours. At the end of that 48 hours, I want every little tiny stick of Cuban military to be a smoking hole in the ground and be gone. And this defector looked at me and he said, Brad, if you were president, Fidel wouldn't have done that. He's not an idiot, and it's the same way. None of these guys are idiots. You don't come to be a dictator of Russia by being stupid. You be wily and tricky and dangerous. That's how you get there. So that's it. I mean, clearly that's the answer to your question. I'm sorry to be so long-winded with the response, but that's it. Everybody knew that Trump would do something, and everybody knows that it's a minimal response out of Biden, which I would say there's two other points I would make about this. I personally don't view, in the scheme of things like world conflict, I don't view what's going on in Ukraine as a particularly high threat. It's bad. It is dangerous, but I don't, the percentage chance of this turning into a world war is really low. I just don't see that as being, a very likely outcome of what's going on now. And like I said, I don't think Putin's planning on invading all of the Balkans and taking them back over, and Poland and Lithuania, and I just don't see any of that happening. But what I do see as dangerous is two things. One of them is a possibility, again, a low percentage shot, but a big risk. And that is what's going on with Turkey. Now, there is a small population of Turkic people inside Ukraine. So Turkey, under President Erdogan, who again is another strong man, kind of a dictator, but a hard ruler of Turkey, who has world ambitions. He wants to bring back the Ottoman Empire and refers to that openly. And so he wants to get his piece of the pie. So he's after this part of Ukraine to get a foothold there. And he's using the exact same tactics that Putin has used by talking about all of these Russian people in Crimea, Russian people in Donbass and all of that, and then he has to go in and protect the Russian people. Erdogan, president of Turkey, is saying the same thing, and he has to protect these Turkic people that are in, it's not a very big number, but he wants to, that's his excuse to go in. But, so he's always been kind of on the sidelines. He's offered support to Ukraine and has verbally come, to the aid of Ukraine a whole bunch through the last few years. So that's sort of his position and why he's doing what he's doing. I'm not suggesting he's doing anything out of the goodness of his heart, and nor is anyone involved. But what the dangerous part is, and you remember I mentioned just how important that those Black Sea ports are to Russia. and they go out through the Bosphorus into the Mediterranean, out to the oceans of the world. The Bosphorus is a little stretch that goes through the straits there through Turkey. And so Turkey controls both banks of that, and it's very narrow. And so the Russian fleets, both commercial shipping and Navy ships, all have to go through this narrow strait. And Turkey, what they have said is that Russia is in a state of war with Ukraine, and that Turkey, according to international treaties, they are supposed to refuse passage of Russian naval vessels because of the state of war in which Russia is involved. And so they're referring to this, and what Erdogan, the Turkish strongman, has said is that the Bosphorus is closed to Russian Navy ships, not the commercial shipping, but the Navy ships. Now, that is a big deal. Now, this is something that he's threatened previously in earlier years. So this is something that's been an ongoing discussion for at least the last 5 or 6 years, and now probably the last decade. And Russia has said, now, how do you stop a ship going through these waters? They're basically, it's sea there. It's just a very narrow part. And so how would you stop ships from going through there? Well, you'd have to basically shoot them or block it somehow with cables or something that you can do. I don't know if Turkey has that capability to block any of those narrowest sections with cables, but if they do, Russia has said they would view all of that as an act of war, and they would fire in defense. So, like I said, I don't think the threat is serious that this would happen, but I think that the danger, if it does happen, is really high, because then you would have Turkey, who is a NATO country, in a shooting war with Russia, who's already in a state of belligerence of some sort in Ukraine, in an open shooting war. And then NATO is required to come to the aid of Turkey if that agreement, is upheld. If the NATO articles are upheld, that NATO should come to the aid of Turkey in a shooting war with Russia. Now, that's bad. That then has the potential to really explode into a much, much larger problem. Like I said, I don't think that that's likely. And I repeat, Erdogan only said he was going to do that. We don't know that he has, in fact, actually done that and is enforcing it. But Russia will test it. They're going to send some Navy ships through there. So we'll find out here in the near future how that's going to play out. The other thing I wanted to mention, and this is where I really think the danger lies, is, and it's really nothing to do with any of this stuff going on around the Black Sea. And that is China, because China all along has said, and again, they, just like Putin, are just extraordinarily consistent in what they're saying, and that they've reserved the right to impose through force their control over Taiwan. They absolutely plan to go into Taiwan. It's only a question of when. And anyone that says anything different is completely out to lunch. They are going to go in. It's a question of when, not if. So unless, of course, politically Taiwan just completely capitulates and gives up and becomes a part of communist China. I mean, I suppose that's a possibility too. But barring that, then they're going in. So I think that's the real danger, because we have a very, very weak president just to begin with. I don't think he was ever the brightest bulb in the pack. I think now he's mentally infirm, and I think all of this stuff is just escaping him. It's just spinning out of his control. And I think China is looking at that, engaging, there will be a decision made into China when to go in. Now, what prompts that decision to take place, we don't know. And it's basically in the hands of one man. The premier of China is going to be the guy to make that decision. So, how do you guess when one guy's going to decide to do something? You just don't know. But somewhere in his calculations are tripwires that when this happens and that happens, we're going in. And this, I think, is very dangerous in that aspect. There's supposedly I forget what the Supreme Communist Party meeting, whatever, the grand boobahs of communism in China are going to meet early next year. I believe they have this grand meeting of whatever it's called in January. So he has something coming up that's big to him. And also part of his calculations are what goes on here in the United States. And we have off-year elections in November. So he knows if for example, he were to go into Taiwan now, probably the Republicans would win every seat that there was to run for, and Chinese would look at that and go, well, if the Republicans won every single seat, they could impeach Biden, maybe get somebody else in there that would be a danger to us. We can't take that risk. So my opinion is there's a lot of other factors we don't know, so this might be wrong. It could easily be wrong. But my opinion is that I think Taiwan is safe until after the new year. But I think that is when it begins. The real danger period begins because our elections are in November and they have that plenary, whatever it is, the Communist Party meeting, I think in January. That's when the clock starts ticking. And it stops clicking when Biden leaves office in 2024, because they know they have that 2-year window to go in, and they're not going to see a big response out of the U.S. Now might be a good time too, because there's just pandemonium everywhere, and with Russia running amok in Ukraine and everybody threatening war in Poland and all this other stuff and nuclear war and lions and tigers and bears, oh my, that's a good time in that pandemonium to maybe go into Taiwan. So it could be imminent. I tend to think, as I said, not. I tend to think after the new year, and that 2-year period that remains of Biden's administration, I think that's when they'll go in. I mean, a lot of things could happen between now and then, and they might not do it because of other reasons, but that is a window for them. Whether they make the call to go in remains to be seen, but that's their window. If they're going to do it anytime soon, that's when they'll do it.
Okay.
And
wow.
That's a big threat. Japan would get into the fray, a nuclear country. There would be a lot of other nations that would see this and go, holy cow, the Chinese ambitions in the Pacific Ocean, South Pacific Ocean are incredible. They've been already measuring where they're going to put their runways and bases on islands belonging to the Philippines and Indonesia and Vietnam. Those countries then, would they jump into the fray? Do we have an Asian wide war going on there? How could that happen without the U.S. being involved? So I mean, holy cow, that's dangerous stuff. Really dangerous stuff. So that's my real worry out of what I'm seeing happening in Ukraine, is it erupting into this massive battle, which might erupt into perhaps not a full world war, but certainly a half the world war. I don't know what you'd want to call it, but a huge problem. I see that as the real danger. And make no mistake, China is the #1 threat, long-term strategic threat to U.S. national security, bar none. Whoever's in second place, probably Russia, I guess, but whoever's in second place, they're in a very distant second place. Nobody's even close to China as far as a overall threat to U.S. national security.
And you mentioned China and Taiwan and that whole situation. Does China have an active or big influence on what is going on in Ukraine and Russia? Which way do you think they're leaning in towards that, even if they're not, having an active influence in there?
There's just before all of this took place, I would say over the last year, China and Russia have come to a number of agreements. They made some trade agreements, things like that. And then they made some agreement that Putin, I think, announced. And I think China mentioned at something at the Olympics to this. They alluded to this. And they came to some sort of agreement, and we're not sure what it is. And I forgot Putin's exact words when he was kind of announcing this, but it was that they came to some sort of level of national strategic cooperation, which is sort of nebulous. You don't know what does that mean? What specifically are you now? Are you joining your militaries together? Is it a NATO type thing, or is it that you're giving 10% off on trade, or what does all that mean? So we don't know. But they announced that this agreement existed. So there is cooperation going on in the background between Russia and China, which I guess you would want to look at it with this conclusion, is that China is basically at a level of cooperation with Russia, and they don't really care about Ukraine. And I mean, I would say that's the smart money anyway. I mean, I don't see how Ukraine is going to come out of this the grand champion, having done super well. I just don't see a happy conclusion from the Ukrainian perspective to this. I don't know what that scenario would be, but I don't think there's any scenario of that nature that's got anything above, say, a 1% chance of coming true. So I think it's all unhappy endings for Ukraine, unless, getting a $6 billion payoff is a happy ending and losing half your country. I mean, if that's a happy ending, then yeah, that probably will happen.
Sure, sure. And you mentioned Turkey. Besides Turkey, are there any other players in the area that could have an actionable or sizable influence on what's going on between Ukraine and Russia, or is it largely, kind of Russia's in the driver's seat right now?
Well, Belarus, of course, so they're supposedly sending in troops, and they are most of the northern border of Ukraine is actually Belarus, and so there's been Russian troops stationed there. Belarus is essentially, they have a relationship with Russia, much like what it was under the Soviet Union. They're basically a puppet republic of Russia, so they do pretty much what they want there. I mean, they are still a separate country, so they are a player in that sense that they're a complete ally of Russia and helping in any way Russia demands. On the other side of it, basically the other players are Europe, and Germany has been the real bug in the ointment out of all of this, and previously had refused to really consider sanctions because of the oil and gas shipments, and Europe is dependent on Russia for these resources, and to heat their houses in winter and stuff, and they refused to allow arms and ammunition to flow through Germany, which is the natural path to go towards Ukraine by truck and stuff. So they've refused that to happen until the last day and a half or 2 days, where again, this was Putin taking it to the next level, taking it to the next level, taking it to the next level. And now we're starting to see response as he keeps upping the ante in this situation. So Germany has now flip-flopped, and they've cut off import, which that's helpful, but it wasn't done en masse. It was just Germany. So the United States and everybody else has to do the same thing, or it won't make that much difference. And now they're saying they allow arms and ammunition to be shipped through. So that is a big turnabout for Germany. But everybody has to fall into place with them to do it, and they're not. So the EU, essentially the European countries, should they decide to act in unison with Germany and take it up another step or two, could be important players. I think they'll muddle their way through it and come up with something along those lines. It's just, we so desperately need leadership here in the United States, and we just don't have it. And that's another difference between Trump and Biden. Trump is a leader. He would have done something. You may hate him, not like him, orange man, bad, whatever, but he would have done something, and he would have believed in it and tried to pick the right thing to do. Whereas Biden, with Biden, his calculations aren't what is the right solution to fix the problem. His calculations is what's best for me. And, there's a grand difference. So we need that leadership, and don't have it and aren't going to get it for at least another 2.5 years. So I don't know. I worry about how all that will play out, because you got all the Macron in France, and you got Germany, and they all are kind of disagreement, and it's chaos, which lets Putin keep doing whatever the hell he wants. So that's just, I don't know how to fix it. I don't know if there's nobody to step up to the plate and kind of take charge. You need a captain of the ship, and we don't have one.
Right. And just wrapping up here, we've got about 4 or 5 minutes left, Brad. I want to be respectful of your time because I know you have another meeting. I wanted to ask before you closing thoughts, besides the Russia-Ukraine conflict and then China in general, what do you think the next big issue is that people should be paying attention to and maybe are not paying attention to as much as they should at this point in time? What would you say that would be?
Well, I mean, I would put China as essentially first, second, and third place. Everything else is, kind of tertiary or more distant from being a problem. There are other areas of the world that could be hot spots, as I mentioned, and this is almost completely ignored in the press, but there's a lot of other stuff going on. Lebanon, for example, has essentially fallen apart, and the prime minister fled maybe like a month ago now or something like that. So it's complete pandemonium, just meltdown of government. Well, into that chaos, somebody's going to step, and who is it? It's not the U.S., It's not Western Europe. So there's nobody that we would look at and go, good guy. So who's the most likely? Well, we know that Iran has been very active in there. They have tremendous regional ambitions. So they're very active in that area. How much control they've taken of Lebanon, I don't know. But certainly, there's terrorist groups in there that they've been backing in the past. So I would be very surprised to learn that Iran was not taking an active role. That's again, they have ports there, seaports and things like that. So for smuggling arms to other countries and things like that, and for jihad and so on, it would be a big deal to control the coast of Lebanon. So I think nefarious forces are at play there. We've seen, Israel under a lot of pressure. Iran is now making nuclear weapons. Iran has said, again, these guys are very consistent with what they say. They've always said all the way along, we need nuclear weapons so we can wipe Israel off the map. And, they usually, they're kind of crazy guys, but they're very consistent in what they say, and their worldview is very consistent. And so they say that that's what they want the weapons for, and I take them at face value on that. I think they do. So Iran is not far from having missile delivery systems and having nuclear weapons so they can put nuclear warheads on those missiles. And I think that they will indeed, figure out a way that's at the most opportune moment and try to nuke Israel off the map. So, that is a big danger that's just being largely ignored. And right now we're in negotiations. Biden, this challenged individual, is in negotiations with Iran to reinstate this nuclear treaty, which, that's freaking madness, just madness, because the nuclear treaty that Obama came up with has said, well, okay, you can have nuclear weapons, but you got to wait 10 years. I mean, that was the essence of the agreement, which how stupid is that? They're going to use it if they get it. Why, if they use it in 2 years or use it in 10 years, is it less bad if it's in 10 years? But that was the deal that Obama made. I mean, just idiocy. And Biden comes out of that, and he's trying to reinstate that. So there's some real dangers out there of that nature. Now, is that the greatest threat compared to China? No. But is that a serious threat? I mean, hell yes. You want a nuclear exchange to take place? Let's not forget, Israel's a nuclear nation. If somebody fires nukes at them, they're going to fire them back. And then you've got a nuclear exchange taking place in the world. How big does it get from there? Who takes whose side? What happens? And even then, I'm not sure Biden, I don't think he has the balls, and I don't think he has the IQ to figure out a plan of action should something like that take place. Now, again, that 2-year window I mentioned, that 2-year window between these elections in November and the 2024 elections 2 years later, that is a window also for Iran. What are they going to do in that period of time? I mean, there are other dangers like that out there in the world. So there's a lot of movement going on. Iraq has essentially been taken over by Iran. There's a lot of that provides a lot of additional resources for Iran's things. We all know that Iran is a state sponsor of terror. That whole area of the world is getting dangerous too. And the way we pulled out of Afghanistan, holy cow! And now, who's in charge there? It's the same bad guys. And the Taliban. There's differences between all these groups, but not in outcome. They all are up to the same stuff. So, does it really matter if that bomb was set off by Al Qaeda or ISIS? They're both setting off bombs, killing innocent people. So, I personally don't find the difference to be that important. Yes, they're different groups, and you'd want to go destroy them both individually. But, Taliban, that's just another one. And we know what their belief system is. We know what they're doing. We already had a bomb go off which killed 13 Marines that was done by Al Qaeda in Afghanistan. It was just falling apart. And what does the deputy director of the CIA come out and say? He goes, well, it's going to take years for Al Qaeda to reconstitute and start killing people and setting off bombs. And they'd already done one. He came out after they'd done the bomb in Afghanistan, killing those 13 Marines. The dumb shits that are in charge of national intelligence just scares the piss out of me because they're so politically corrupt that they're incompetent. They're allowing people to be killed. And again, I bring up the difference. So if Al Qaeda doesn't kill anybody today, but they start killing people in 2 years, then that's okay? So it's all right? Don't worry anybody because they're not going to start killing people for 2 years? I mean, what kind of horse's rear end would say something like that? But yet the deputy director of the CIA comes out and says stuff like that. I mean, just, oh my God, can you just pull your head out of your rear for 2 minutes and look around and kind of, see something that's actually going on in the world? A danger in 2 years is something that you need to nip in the bud now so that they're not out there killing people, because that's how you save lives, not going, yeah, they're going to start killing people in 2 years, so then we'll worry about it in 2 years. I mean, dumbass, just dumbass. I mean, forgive my bad language, but, that gets people killed. That means you wait for those bombs to go off, you get your first dead people in the street, and then you react? What?
Yeah.
I don't know. All this stuff scares me. But anyway, this is why, as I've mentioned at the very beginning of the show, this is what drives me nuts. This is why I'm so dedicated to doing what I'm doing to reform intelligence. You got to get rid of these politicized and weaponized guys in leadership so that they don't look at the world like through what's good for me politically lens. They look at the world as, well, how do we fix this shit fest and stop our people from getting killed? That's where I want the mindset of intelligence is, how do we keep Americans safe here in our own country, but also overseas? How do we keep the United States stable and safe, not only for us, but for our kids and our grandkids and our great-grandkids, for 2 or 3 or 4 generations down? Those are the problems we need to be fixing now. And these guys are just inept. They do these every 4 years, right after the president, they do these big intelligence analyses that are used to, kind of decide how funds are used and how planning needs to take place and intelligence resources need to be deployed and all that sort of stuff. And this last one that they did, and the one before that, the focus was on global warming. Well, okay, look, global warming is a dumbass thing just to begin with. There's not even any evidence of it being true as a man-made thing. We know the climate of the Earth changes all the time. We've had tropical periods, we've had ice ages and all that without humans even on the planet. So we know the weather swings back and forth all the time. There's no theory, no proof, no evidence anywhere by anybody that shows that man is causing weather to change. We know weather changes by itself, but nothing shows man causes it. Yet, now, even if you don't believe that, even if you think mankind is causing the weather to change, that is not something that the CIA needs to worry about. That is a political issue. That is not an intelligence issue. Like I said, the CIA needs to be focused on stopping bad guys from killing good guys. That's their focus, national security, not global warming. So first of all, it's all bullshit. But second of all, that's not the CIA problem anyway. And so here we have the CIA focus out of these intelligence things that are published, saying that we need to worry about global warming and how global warming is going to change the global governments, and that we need to be a more integrated global government. Well, what is that? That's the Pangea global communist government. So you've got the intelligence agencies, the entire intelligence community pumping out crap that's pure politics promoting global socialism. And I'm stunned when I read these things. I always do podcasts over this, covering and pointing out some of the stuff that goes in there. The one that they did 4 years ago or 5 years ago now, they did this big report as part of the intelligence report for every 4 years that they do from the entire intelligence community, pointing out with this chart showing all this stuff that if you have strong Christian beliefs, you're stupid. That is in there. That's a chart. I even have it somewhere here. And that, because I keep it, because I like to refer to it, because that is the intelligence community. What they're working on is, if you're religious, you must be stupid. Now, again, first of all, what a load of crap. And second of all, even if that's true, which it's not, but even if that is true, that's not the business or purview of the intelligence community. We don't want the intelligence community working on, if you're Christian, you're stupid, and if you're agnostic, you're smart. That's not something for them to work on. But what is that? That is, again, the intelligence community representing the world socialist government concept, which that is, we don't want any of that. That's all bad. That's evil. That gets people killed. That's the worst thing that we can have them do. But control of all of the agencies to one degree or another has been heavily politicized and heavily weaponized, which is why now I'm completely spinning off into something else. But that's why we saw Trump get targeted by the CIA, NSA, DOJ, FBI, and that's as candidate Trump, and then later as President Trump with those FISA warrants, because they were spying on him. And we just saw the Durham indictments come out saying all that stuff. So it's just all of this stuff has to get under control, which I said, now I speak passionately about it because that's why I founded Americans for Intelligence Reform. These are the issues where I'm trying to overcome, which, it's a tough uphill battle, but it needs to be done.
Definitely. And we appreciate the work you're doing, Brad. Where can people find you? We're at the top of our hour here, and I do want to be respectful of your time, sir. Where can people support you, and how can they support you? I know I got your links, your Twitter, your website, intelreform.com, Facebook, BitChute, Rumble. Are you still on YouTube, or did you get censored off YouTube? How can people find your work?
Well, you're the champion of getting censored on YouTube, but I'm still on YouTube, but I don't put things like this on YouTube because they'll just kick me off. So I do put a lot of things on YouTube. I am still there, but just start at the website, intelreform.org, and we're basically everywhere on social media. Like you said, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, we're out there everywhere, so we can be easily found. You can just search Brad Johnson, CIA, Americans for Intelligence Reform, that sort of stuff, and I'll pop up eventually. Google also censors me too, but keep at it. Use somebody else, DuckDuckGo, and you'll find me all over the place.
Yeah, that's what I use as well. And great stuff as usual, Brad. Really appreciate you coming on. Hopefully we can do it again soon, and help try to get the public steered towards truth, which I think is both of our goals. But this will be available anywhere podcasts can be listened to in audio format. The video format will be found on rockfin.com/AddyAds, ADDYADDS, and people can tip there, as well as buy me a coffee, Patreon, Subscribe Star, Venmo, Cash App. And once again, thanks you to the audience and Brad for joining us today. Stay frosty.
My pleasure. Anytime.
And we'll see everybody next time. Thank you again, sir.